Hello, BookTube. I almost forgot that I want to do a Friday Reads, especially since as I glance at the calendar, I realize that this will be my last Friday Reads of 2018. Uh, by next Friday, I will no longer be reading at all, much less reading new books. I won't even care about them. There'll be packages piled up in the front hallway. But that's not true today. Today, I have some books to go through with you. Paperbacks, a small stack of paperbacks. I don't know how much more in addition to this I will read that's new or new in paperback. The other books that I read will probably be titles that I'm commissioned to review, get those out of the way before the year ends, and an increasing amount of rereading, including finishing up what I started this morning, which is a rereading of Geoffrey of Monmouth. But for now, I have 4 books that I want to show you, and we can talk about them a little. The first one is something we saw. I think we may have seen a lot of these on this channel before. This is Megray in Court, the latest this wonderful paperback series of new translations of all of the writings of Georges Simenon that's being done by Penguin. And this is, what have we got here? When Megray is called to testify in court and reveals his doubts about a picture framer accused of a double murder, his actions have tragic consequences that he could never have foreseen. And I vaguely remember this book, so I'll be glad to reread it again, because the last time I read it was in a different translation. And I've noticed that some of these translations aren't, the prose here is simple. A first former in learning French could translate these books, but you get 2 really good translators to attack these texts, and you will get very different results. The ones that I really remember, Megray and the Tall Woman, Megray Takes a Vacation, Megray Regrets, Megray's Fears, Megray's Memoirs. Some of the volumes that I remember well from the first time that I read them in the earlier English translations, I read again in these and felt like I was reading a subtly but very noticeably different novel. So I'm really looking forward to this. This will be... I meant to pop it down right away, but then I got sidetracked with a bunch of other stuff, so I will read it tonight. Then this next one is a paperback release of a novel that came out a little bit earlier this year, that I never actually got to. This is Thomas Pearce, The Afterlife. The Afterlives. The paperback pub sheet has all the blurbs that it got from all sorts of critics, left, right, and center. And it's this book follows the adventures of Jim Bird after he dies, technically, from a freak cardiac event at age 33, but only for a few minutes. Revived with no memory of an afterlife, Jim grapples with the questions of what awaits us, or doesn't, when we die. In his search for a machine that connects the living with the dead, he must contend with ghosts, holograms, mysterious particles that blip in and out of existence, and even the most unusual phenomenon of all, love. And I gave it a wide berth, I think, when it first came out, and I probably shouldn't have, because, it's fiction. And of course, that's right where the subject belongs. You need to be able to demonstrate something in order to claim that something is true. You need to be able to provide some kind of evidence for that something in order for anyone to believe that it's true, including you. So if I tell you that there are pink winged elephants in one part of Africa, and you say, well, it's 2018, I've got a phone and there's the internet, so can you show me a link? And I say, no, I can't give you any proof at all that there are such things. I'm telling you that there are. You will probably not believe me. You might humor me, but you won't ever say to anybody else, hey, did you know there are pink-winged elephants in a small part of Africa? You won't do that because you'll need proof. And never in 11,000 religions and in 18,000 years of human existence on Earth and human civilization on Earth, and probably 118,000 years of human life and proto-human life on Earth, nowhere in any of that, ever, even once, has there been any evidence that anything, any part of any human being, survives physical death. Never. That is an idea without any proof at all. So you can effectively say that idea is not true. It might not be comforting, but you can effectively say that it isn't true. We know perfectly well what happens that we can see and measure, not just in humans, but in all living organisms. Your heart is a muscle in your chest. It beats day and night. It supplies oxygen to the blood that flows through your brain. Your brain is sloppy, goopy, wet tissue that has amazing processing power and amazing folds and lattices. And that rich oxygenated blood allows your brain to fire constantly, electrochemically, and create vast storehouses of memories, impressions, depths and complexities of emotions. And if that supply of oxygenated blood stops, your brain darkens and dies. And all of those files disappear. They don't disappear somewhere else. They don't go somewhere else. It's exactly like those who are old enough to remember. You have an SLR camera with film in it. You open the back, light blasts onto the film. All of the images that film contained of your trip to Washington, D.C. are now gone. Beyond recall. The film is still there, but the images are gone. And when you do that, when, you've got the camera in the back of the car and Aunt Edna says, "What's this?" and opens it up, and the whole trip, all the vacation photos are exposed. When that happens, no one in the car says, "Well, they exist somewhere. I hope they're happy. They exist forever somewhere." No one does that. No one does that. Same thing when you're driving down the highway and you see the burst open body of a raccoon on the side of the road. You don't think that raccoon exists somewhere. Somewhere that raccoon, a spirit version of that raccoon, is hunting tadpoles and washing acorns forever. You don't think that. And the reason you don't is because you have absolutely no evidence to think that. You know what you see. That we are organic bubbles. We come together through random chance and a lifetime of experience, and that builds us into the incredibly unique individuals that we are. And when that incredible uniqueness starts to be damaged, either by dementia or through death, all of that goes away. It doesn't go somewhere. It disappears. It's gone. So a novel that sort of, that takes as the main bone that it's going to worry, that there has to be something. The author, the main character, has a near-death experience or death experience. He's dead for minutes. He comes back, but he doesn't remember an afterlife, and that's pretty strange, isn't it? Because if he was dead, he would remember one, because we all know it's there. Reading that in the advanced copy and the hardcover of this book probably put me off reading the book, and it shouldn't. It shouldn't at all. I mean, I might have a realistic viewpoint about this sort of thing. But that doesn't mean that I don't get shivers when I watch a stage version of Hamlet. Or, to use a more modern example, that doesn't mean that I don't grin from ear to ear at the great moment in The West Wing, when Jed Bartlett is in the Oval Office and he's having the worst crisis of his presidency, and it's a howling hurricane outside, and his treasured, incredibly valued, lifetime secretary, Mrs. Landingham, has just recently died. She was hit by a random drunk driver and killed on the road. And this moment of crisis for Jed Bartlett is exactly the moment when he would probably wanted to talk to her. And at one point, when he's alone in the Oval Office, a gust of wind blows a door open. And rain starts to flash in, and there's thunder and lightning, and out of sheer frustration, he yells out, "Mrs. Landingham!" And the actress that walks in the door. She walks in from her reception office. And he stares at her for a good 15 seconds. It's a wonderful, wonderful moment. He stares at her because he knows that she's dead. But he also knows he's not imagining her. And it's just wonderful. So it doesn't, I can still appreciate stuff like that, even though I know where the wishful thinking they're built on comes from. So I can read this book. It's not anathema to me. I can read it. And speaking of, is this a dagger I see before me? The next paperback is Macbeth. The latest in this is the paperback version of the latest in the Hogarth Shakespeare series, where a whole bunch of contemporary authors are asked to rework classic Shakespeare plays in whatever setting they like and in whatever way they want. And this author, who's famous for his hard-bitten police procedurals, reworks the story of Macbeth as a hard-bitten police procedural. Set in 1970s in a rundown, rainy industrial town, this Macbeth centers on a police force struggling to shed an incessant drug problem. Duncan, chief of police, is idealistic and visionary, a dream to the townspeople but a nightmare for criminals. The drug trade is ruled by two drug lords, one of whom, a master of manipulation named Hecate, has connections with the highest powers and plans to use them to get his way. Hecate's plot hinges on steadily, insidiously manipulating Inspector Macbeth, the head of a SWAT team and a man already susceptible to violent and paranoid tendencies. What follows is an unputdownable story of love and guilt, political ambition, and the greed for more, exploring the darkest corners of human nature and the aspirations of the criminal mind. And I, myself, was enormously impressed by this. I thought it was just a total success along the lines of the Hogarth Shakespeare series. And here it is in paperback, so can't wait to read. It'll be a treat to read it again. And then the last one that we'll do for today, the last of my Friday reads for today, is also going to be a treat for a slightly more personal reason. This is N.D. Galland, and it is a novel called On the Same Page. Let me read you the description, because this is a pure joy. Let me hold you up there. You can see, you can take a guess at where this takes place. Joanna Howes left her home on Martha's Vineyard at 18 to pursue her career in journalism and never looked back. So she knows better than most the two distinct personalities of the island. On the one hand, there are the tanned and polished summer people, and on the other, there are the true islanders, the small-town, salt-of-the-earth folk who stick it out year-round. There's an obvious divide between the two groups, with islanders often harboring some resentment toward the summer people who tend to think only of themselves when it comes to local decisions. One such summer person, Orion Smith, happens to be the talk of the island when he sues the town government for the right to land his private helicopter on his property. After years away from home, Joanna suddenly finds herself returning to Martha's Vineyard to care for her curmudgeon of an uncle who's been injured. As weeks stretch into months, she worries she may have bit off more than she can chew, especially financially. When she realizes that neither hometown paper will pay her enough, she secretly begins writing for both of them. A huge risk, since each paper caters to its own distinct readership. The Journal and the News have developed such an intense rivalry that each refuses to work with anyone who has any relationship with the other. Joanna just happens to have a connection at both and takes full advantage by writing under two different bylines. Two Martha's Vineyard newspapers. She writes for both of them, one under her own name and one under a pseudonym, in order to get a little extra money. And it seems to be working tentatively at first, and then you can just guess. She gets assigned the same story from both. And one of the papers is a glitzy, full-color, ad-filled modern newspaper, and the other is a folded, old, oversized broadsheet. And the one caters to the old town, the year-rounders, the native islanders, and the other caters to the glitzy new summer people. And so it's not just that they're rival newspapers, it's that they write and look at things in completely different ways. And I've heard about this book, but I have not read this, and I will happily. This is slated for December 31st, and I'm sort of having it both ways here. I know I said on this channel that I'm considering December 31st books to be January books, and I will probably review this in January, but I'm also thinking if it's a December thing, then I can read it now. I can read it in December. And the reason that it's personal, of course, is because I write for a Martha's Vineyard newspaper. I'm the book reviewer for the Vineyard Gazette. So this is gonna be very familiar territory for me. Can't wait. It sounds like a hoot. So we have On the Same Page for this last Friday reads of 2018. We have Macbeth, finally an interesting version of the story called Macbeth. Then we have the Afterlives, which gave rise to a huge digression on my part in this video. Sorry for that. And also Megray in Court, a new translation of a classic Megray mystery that deals with the nightmare that haunts all policemen, which is their time in court when they have to go in and testify in court. No cop that I know likes that. So that's my Friday reads for today. And I'm going to wrap this up now. You've had plenty of videos from me, but we'll reconvene tomorrow. Thank you, BookTube.